A lot of what I'm going to show you are improvements or new features that have been added in 15. If you worked with DaVinci Resolve 14 or you're working on it now and you've never tried Fairlight, or even if you have, it's absolutely worth jumping into the 15 beta. This is beta version 3, and all these features are working really well, and they're very exciting, so it's definitely worth checking out. And we're going to start over here on the far right with the inspector. And the inspector is on all of our main pages, and what's great about this is I can see information on my individual clips. For example, right here, I just selected a clip, and now I can see specific information about that clip. Here's my clip volume, and here's something right here that's really cool. The second thing down is it shows me my pitch. And I can change the pitch on every single clip up to 24 semitones in either direction. If you notice, higher or lower, that's 2 full octaves. And for anyone who does sound design, or if you just want to, maybe you have an alarm going off in your scene and you just want to change the pitch a little bit to make it a little lower or higher because it's competing with something else, I use it all the time. Don't tell anyone on voiceovers and things like that. I'll knock someone's voice down 1 or 2 semitones just to smooth it out, make it sound better. Depends on what mic you're using, but that's really useful, and that's every single clip. Also, on every single clip, I have a 4-band EQ, so if I need to make any minor adjustments, I can do that right here, turn that on and off. And down at the bottom, it also lists any of your plugins. And in this case, I have one of our brand new Fairlight effects. So we now have a full set of plugins, effects plugins that come with DaVinci Resolve 15. And as you can see, this is my de-esser. If you look at, you're probably going, well, gee, that looks pretty easy to use. It is. Since I can't actually see you, just give me a little noise out there. How many of you have used a de-esser before? Okay. If you're not sure what it is, it's for those S's that you need to get out, that real whistly sound that people make that I was just doing, and that's really annoying for some of us. We can just dial those down really easily right here, and I can close that up. So that's one of our plugins. They are all very easy to use, pretty self-explanatory. So if you're used to plugins, you'll figure it out really fast. If you've never used them, you'll figure it out really fast also. So that's the inspector. Also, just really quickly, on every single timeline, you'll have a mixer. This, as you can see, is expandable. You will have a channel strip for every single track. And here you have a 7-band EQ on every single track if you need it. You also have your built-in dynamics, and these are independent dynamics processing, so you've got an expander, a gate, a compressor, and a limiter built into every single track just from the start. You can also combine those with plugins and everything else, but that's just something you can work with immediately. And we have our panning controls also, so you can adjust 2D or 3D pan depending on what you're working with on every single track. So that's without doing any extra patching. I didn't have to go any menus. I have to do nothing but make a track. So that is my mixer. So let's jump on over here. I'm going to show you way over on the left. This is also in the edit page. You've seen it before. This is our media pool. And one of the huge improvements we have now is, let me just bring this up. Let's look for some clips. And right here, I can actually see my video clips right here. Even though I'm in an audio application, or I'm working on my audio page, I can actually go down through here. I can look at my footage. I can select a clip. And notice I can now see my source audio right here in the source monitor. So that's very cool. Having a source viewer, I can see it. I can see the channels. You can actually zoom in more if you need to see it a little bit better, or zoom out. So that's awesome. And you can mark your ins and outs. And where this is really useful is if you're working on the sound for something and there's one word that's just not really working out, or you can't hear it very well, or you know it's also in another take. I could just jump over to that take and I can grab just the word I wanted to, mark ins and outs, and edit that in and see if I can fix it without having to go to ADR or something else. So very useful. You don't do any video editing when you're on the audio page. When you're here in Fairlight, you're only working in your professional audio. So let's look at something else. While I'm over here, I'm going to show you some sound effects. And this is something else you notice, Paul mentioned this also, is you can see the waveform as you're looking at your different clips. But check this out. If I select a clip, do you notice it also shows me both of my channels right away? Now what I'm going to do to spare your ears for a moment, I'm going to dim the sound Do you all see me over here on the far right? These are my playback controls just for volume. So when I dim, that's going to knock down the volume by 20 decibels, and that's really awesome. If someone asks you that question, like, excuse me, while you're in the middle of something really important, excuse me, where's the bathroom, or whatever it is they want to know, you can dim it and keep doing whatever you were doing and just point or answer the question and then undim. You can also mute altogether if you need to really easily, and that's right up here in the top right corner. So the reason I have set this up is I wanted to show you that there are both of my channels, which is great. So I can instantly select any clip and I can say, oh, stereo, great. I know exactly what I want to do with that. Or look at this one. I selected this sound effect. It has 6 channels. Why? What does that mean? That's right. That's right. So now I know I have a 5.1 surround sound. Awesome. That's great. And now what if I want to edit with that? Now if I were to take... So this is like a riddle, right? What happens when you take a 5.1 surround sound clip and you drop it into a stereo track? What do you get? You get 2 channels of audio. You get your stereo left and right, just the first 2 channels. So one of the cool things in DaVinci Resolve 15 is now I can take this clip, drag it down to the timeline to an empty space, and when I release it, it automatically makes a new track with the channel configuration that matches whatever my source was. So if it was an adaptive track with 4 mics and 4 channels, you're going to get that. If it's a stereo clip, you're going to get that. And in this case, I got my stereo sound effect right there in that clip. So pretty cool, yes? Yay! Especially, one thing I saw a lot of people had issues with in the previous versions of Resolve is when they would go to make a track, they would always end up with their dialogue in stereo tracks, which drove me crazy because when you have stereo dialogue, you can't adjust the individual channels. You have to change those so you can. So now if they're mapped properly, you can get those right, and then you can always change it here. A question I get sometimes is people ask me, well, wait a minute, I have a track that's got 6 channels of audio, but I only want to hear the boom. And you can fix that right here once it's in the timeline, or even the clip. I had showed this earlier. Just go into the clip, go to your clip attributes, and I could change this from a 5.1 to, let's say, mono, and choose which channel I actually want to hear. There. Now I'm only listening to my boom, let's just say, in this hypothetical example. But that's something that people want to know. So yeah? Good? Yeah. Okay, I'll just delete that track. So that's pretty exciting. I realize I just showed you a monitor and a timeline. Woo! Let me just say it gets better than that. Okay, let's come over here, and now I'm going to show you some other really cool features. And for this one, I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. Let's just randomly come over here. There's some dialogue. Make this a little bit bigger, because bigger is fun, and I can. Okay, so now what happens when you go to play normally in a timeline, and I start my playback? What happens every time it gets to the end of the page? It redraws, right? Which is nothing wrong with that, that's great, but sometimes instead, when you're playing through, maybe you want to focus on what's actually being played, and so now we have an option, and I'm going to show you several options right here in this menu, which ironically is called Timeline View Options, which actually works. And so in this situation, one of the things I can do is I can actually fix the playhead. And by turning on Fix Playhead, now when I play, what happens is everything scrubs underneath the playhead wherever I happen to have that placed. And this is really nice if you're just listening to dialogue. Here, let me actually undim this.
Philip Maida.
Identify the person on the med lab.
Philip Maida.
Ada, how's that possible?
And so what's nice about this, when you are working with your dialogue or when you're just listening to something, now you can actually focus, and as it scrolls underneath, if you hear something, you immediately can see what it was, and it allows you to go into that nice audio trance that we often do when we're just watching and listening slowly. So that's a cool feature, yes? Woo! Okay, it gets better. Hang on, there's more. So let's say, okay, another hypothetical. We're in here working, and I'm about to cut some clips together, and I need to add a sound effect, and I really need to see my video track because I want to see what was going on at a particular moment. Well, you can also go to the same view options now and click right here, and that now shows my video track. And if I had multiple video tracks, I will see them all, including my titles. So if you're doing any audio work that's based on where those video cuts were, I can see those at the same time. So you have a lot of flexibility right here. Let's do something else, but wait, there's more. I'll turn that off. And now this is something I wouldn't use every day, but it's worth showing. In this case, I'm just going to pop out my viewer and make it a little smaller. So I'm working at a really weird angle with my monitor, so if my head's turned to the side, it's just me watching this. It's kind of fun that way, though. All right, let's put this up here for no reason. All right, so I'm going to work on something, and in this case, I'm going to do some fine-tuned sound design, or let's say I'm going to add some sound effects. And what I want to do is I need to see it a little bit better. We're going to go up to this menu, and in this particular case, I'm going to bring up my scroller. And when I turn that on, you notice down at the bottom of the screen, I now see every single frame. If any of you can't see, it's down there. So we have a scroller, and I can also turn on up to 2 different tracks of audio as well. So now I have an audio track. In this case, it's my little explosion, and I'm going to move a little closer to the action. And what I can see now is I can see the frames, and the goal is I was listening to something, and it sounded like the sound effect is not right. My assistant did it, not me. So I'm going to just check and see what's going on. So if I play this.
Boom, there's this explosion, and it surrounded the whole ship.
Okay, so there was the sound effect. I heard it, and it was off a little bit, I think. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just grab my scroller, and when I grab my scroller, it moves the playhead. I'm not changing any clips, but I'm now moving the playhead, and I can clearly see the frames, and there's the first clip, and here's my second clip. My sound effect was supposed to be immediately on the very first frame of the spaceship. So if I double-click that, oh, I'm close, right? Does close work in audio? What, 2 frames, 3 frames? Yeah, no, I can't live with that. So that's like 1.5 years in audio terms. So we need to fix this. Well, I'm not going to drag my scroller. I'm going to come up to the clip itself, and now I can just move that into position there to my playhead and watch it redraw. And it should have been right on. Let's double-click that clip again. There it is. I was close. I can also use shortcuts to move my clip if I have it selected. So fairly cool. Would I use this every day? No, but I would use it for the right situation, right? If I'm syncing sound effects, if I'm doing something like that, I would totally use this as needed. So double-click that. So there we are. So kind of cool. That's our scrollers. And again, when you need it, it's great if you're working in animation and you're trying to add a lot of really precise sound effects that match up with very specific things like eye movements in mouse or whatever. This is kind of cool. So there's our timeline options. I'll turn that off. And let's show you something else while I'm sitting here in this timeline. Let me zoom in a little bit. And those of you who are editors, you're going, well, what about regular old editing? Just so you know, you can do your audio editing that you're used to doing in your NLE. You can still do it on the edit page. I come over to the Fairlight page because I can make my clips really, really big, right? I can really work at them all the way down to the sample level if I want to, and I can sit there and I can adjust individual samples as needed. This is very helpful if somebody happened to say something in the plural and you need to cut that S off the end of a word or something like that. We can get in there and make those adjustments. So it gives you tons of space to work with. What else is nice, you can adjust your volume levels if you notice. Just drag up and down, just as you would expect. You can see instant gratification there. Every single clip does have fade handles, and this is on the edit page as well, so I could fade those in and out. And there's even a shortcut to fade in or fade out to the playhead if that's what you're trying to do. And of course, this is a professional application, so I can also change the curve of my fades if I need to. Well, and you're probably thinking, well, what if you want to add a few keyframes, option click, everything you expect to see in a professional application you're going to see here, so I can totally adjust it as well with keyframes. But wait, there's more. What about, a couple things people asked about was, what if a clip you moved it on purpose and it was slightly out of sync now? Who cares about sync, right? It's audio. Oh, wait. So what do we do if it's out of sync? Well, I happen to do this on purpose, but one thing it will do is it will show you if you've moved something out of sync. In this case, it's just a little room tone, so it won't matter. But if you pull something out of sync, you will now get red boxes. It'll show you, hey, I might want to go over to the edit page and make sure I haven't made any adjustments. In this case, that was on purpose. I just wanted to show you that you can see it, so you don't have to fear that you've made any drastic mistakes. Let's look at something else. Another thing we had a lot of requests for was normalization. And now if you right-click, you can normalize the audio on an individual audio clip right here. I'll just change that to, let's say it's -6, and it probably already was. So try that again. So I'm just changing, and there I just did a normalization on that clip. Well, that's great, but what if I want to do a bunch of clips? And those of you who are serious audio editors or work in audio, you're probably going, what? Normalization, that's such a cheat, right? That's the auto white balance of audio. However, for editors, it's really nice because all of a sudden you can balance out all of your track clips, right? You can suddenly say, okay, my dialogue track, I just want to make sure all the levels are at least close before I show it to somebody, because some people have no imagination for audio. So if I want to do all these clips at one time, I can just right-click, normalize audio, and now it gives me a choice, relative or independent. So if I adjust these relative, it's going to look at them all as if they were one clip. If I do them independently, what I just had, it will then adjust them all individually based on their own individual audio. So that's pretty cool, right? Yes? Okay, so now you can totally cheat, and that also works on the edit page. So for those of you who don't want to sit there and manually adjust all your clip levels, you can cheat. And it also works if you have keyframes, so it will keep those in mind as you make your adjustments. So you can first get it close and then normalize it after. So all that's good. You can also copy and paste attributes now, and that will include your EQ and your plugins as well as your volume level. So I know those don't sound very exciting for those of you who don't do much with audio, but that's really a big deal for those who do. So yay? Yeah, okay. All right, we're going to change timelines. Let's do something more. There's more. Now this is kind of a big one. So I'm now following the same scene to the next progression. This is where I've done some dialogue editing. So obviously I've split off all my characters to different tracks. I've added some room tone and a few extra tracks just to fill it in. And what I need to do is, unfortunately, like often happens, is we have to replace some dialogue. That's called ADR, right? And what does that stand for? Automatic dialogue replacement. That's right. It's not manual dialogue replacement. It's actually automatic, which means we really hope that that process is easy. And it really is. It's right here. And to do this process, I'm also going to bring up I'm trying to save my real estate here because I like to just show the things I need. So I'm going to just pop out my viewer again and hide my meters. So if you're wondering what I'm doing, I just show whatever I need to keep it easy to follow. So in this case, I've got my viewer, I've got my timeline. I'm going to come over here to this brand new panel if I just click this button right here that's called ADR. Not hard to find. Here is my ADR tool set, and it is a complete functioning ADR tool set right in my timeline. So for example, let's go to the setup panel for a moment. And if you look, here's my pre-roll and my post-roll. I can set that to whatever I want to. And what does that mean? That's just how far back the playhead's going to go before it hits the cue. That's all. So, and then for post-roll, it's how far after it's going to go. So right now I have it set up to 5 seconds. I could choose my track. And in this case, I have the ADR track set up. I've created an ADR track just for this demo. And I will choose that as my recording track. You can also choose a guide track. In this case, I'll use Emiliana's track. That's who I'm going to replace. And we will choose that guide track. Okay, see how easy that is? We can also name our recording if you want to add any codes or anything you'd like to for those record file names, you can do that. And I can choose right here my source, and this is kind of awesome, is I can choose my mic, which of course I'm not going to right now because a live mic in this room would probably be really fun. So I won't. But obviously I could select that, and once you have your mic selected, it'll automatically do the patching for you. You don't have to go anywhere else to do it. So that's automatic, part of the automatic dialogue replacement. So once we have that set, let's come down here. Here's my characters. I have 3. I can add another character really easily by just clicking Add New. If you've never worked in any kind of environment like this, just follow along. It's really easy. Just go in there and try it. This is, by the way, not just for dialogue. Anyone ever do Foley work? Okay, this is awesome for Foley as well, because you're going to follow the same procedures, just you're going to be replacing production sound instead of dialogue. So let's come on down and let's look at the fun stuff at the bottom. And I have all these different selections here. And this is really about cueing the talent. You need audio and visual cues. Anyone out here ever work with talent? Where would we be without them, right? Love them. If you ever get them in a booth and have to have them record themselves over again, again, love them. If any of you are in the room or talent, you're awesome. But everyone's different, right? As with any scenario, if you're a director, you already know this. Anyone who works with professional and non-professional talent, it's even more fun. So what we have here is we have all kinds of choices. So for example, right here, it says beep to the endpoint, which is exactly what it sounds like. It will beep right up to the endpoint to cue somebody that they got to talk soon, right? We also have a beep at the endpoint, because some people don't want to hear anything except one beep right before they speak. Then you can set it up that way. You also have a count in, so I could turn that on and I'll actually get a countdown from 10 before they have to actually speak. Some people like numbers, that's good. We even have streamers, so you can get some nice visual cues. And we even have a smart timeline, which will show the line of text. Now, this screen is kind of small, but if you are in a booth and you're sending out your video monitor out to another screen, they can be seeing it on a huge screen, and there's their line as well. So very cool. And that's all just a couple of clicks. So far, so good? No extra apps, didn't have to plug anything in. All I did do is go to this panel. Let's jump over to our list for a minute. Very easy. You notice I already have a list populated here, but I'm going to make a new queue just for you guys. So let me come over here and zoom in a little bit. I'm going to play my timeline.
A, to identify the person I'm speaking with.
Okay, that's the line I'm going to use. So I can set an in point and an out point. And by the way, the shortcuts for in and out in DaVinci Resolve are I and O, just as you would expect in any professional app. So it's not a lot of learning curve there. I'm going to come over here and type out the actual text. But first, I need to add a new queue. And when I do that, it'll use the in and out points that I just set. I don't even need those anymore. I can actually clear my in and out points right there. And the shortcut's the same. You probably already know, Option X. So I'll come over here and type the line. Okay, I think I got that. Close enough. All right, and I can choose the character there. So once I did that, if you look down at the bottom, there's my queue. It's way down there at the bottom of the list, but it is there. So if I click off of this and go to any other queue, it'll jump to that, and I can come back to the one I just made. So all right, you guys have heard enough about this ADR stuff. Let's go ahead and make something happen. I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to go to my record. Now, obviously, I'm not going to record it right now. You have to be really, really quiet. But I will rehearse. So can you all see my screen? Yes, all right, so let's rehearse. I'll just move this right underneath so you'll see.
Are you sure?
Yes.
A, to identify the person I'm speaking with.
Did y'all see that? Had my pre-roll, had my post-roll, had my visual cues. I didn't have to send my project anywhere. I'm just there, and it works. So even if you just have to grab a couple of lines, it's that fast. And what's really great is if I was recording, I would just click right here to record. It would actually create a list, one after the other, right here. And what's great about the list, as you go, there's also a 5-star rating system. No smileys, no frowns, nothing like that, no emojis, but what we do have is 5-star ratings. So if you're doing your Foley or your ADR recording and you hear that awesome take, and you know it when you hear it, you can instantly click that 5-star, and even though the talent will want to go again and again, you know when you've marked your best takes. And if you have a horrible take, you can also mark that as well, or just don't mark it. So it's really cool how this works. So this is ADR in Resolve 15. Pretty cool? Yeah. I was excited to see that too. So, and what's neat about it is when it records, it actually uses our audio track layers. And I don't have an example of it right here, but what it will do is it will record one take after another into the same exact track on separate layers. The top layer is the one that you'll actually hear, but if you can open up and show those audio track layers, and then you can move them around and you can access all of them. You can edit it and create a comp if you want to, all within the same track. So very cool. All right, so let's fast forward. So these are all kind of easy things right in the timeline and just some of the basic stuff I'm just going around and looking at. I'm going to jump ahead and show you a couple of our effects. So let's go over here to our effects for just a second. I'm going to play a really sad example. You see this lime green clip? This horrific looking waveform in it. I just look at that and I already know I'm in trouble, right? Does anyone want to guess what that sound is? Let's play it. Let's see, hopefully these speakers will play it.
High-play core.
Oh, I can't hear it very well. You know, some speakers have like built-in safeties to cut out this particular sound, so. Did you hear it a little bit?
I gave out a few days ago.
There it is. You hear it?
It came out
Yeah, I could turn this up. Let's really hear it, shall we?
of cryo.
There it is. Woo!
Trying to.
What is that sound? Anyone ever play in a band? Way back when, you know what that sound is, right? Or if you recorded film school, anytime like that, it's basically the wires get crossed, right? You get your power cables and your audio cables mixed up, and you get that wonderful power line hum. That's our 60 hertz hum of joy. What was that? It could be 50 if you're in Europe. That's absolutely right. Luckily, it's very intuitive. It's just like driving on the other side of the road, right? It had to be different. So luckily, we can fix that. Let's go over to our inspector. And what I'm going to do for this particular wonderful clip is I'm going to add one of our effects, which gives me an excuse to show you here our Fairlight effects. As you can see, we have a really cool list. Yes. And we have the fun stuff in here too. So we got our modulation, and you got your flanger and chorus if you just want to finesse the sound a little bit. You also have your tools for fixing things. For example, there's my de-esser. Here's my de-hum, which I'm going to use, and we also have noise reduction, all very easy to use. I'm going to scroll down a little bit. There is my clip. I'm going to drop the de-hummer right on top, and here's that interface. Remember, I mentioned these are very easy to use, and as you can see, fairly self-explanatory. It says de-hummer right at the top. Turn them on and off, any of these effects. And I'm going to come down here, and where it shows frequency, I can dial in any frequency I need. So if it's a refrigerator or a computer, and yes, computers make noise. For those of you who want to have a computer in the room when I'm recording, I can hear it. Because there's a lot of people who assume they're just silent. They're not. Just letting you know. All right, so I can move this around, but all I have to do is I can click 60 hertz or 50 hertz for the front row there. If you're in Europe, there's your 50 hertz. I'm going to go to 60 hertz right now. And let me do that while it's on. So I'm going to actually turn this off for a second. Let's back up and play.
The Hyperlight core gave out a few days
And then
ago.
I'm going to drag the amount.
It came out of cryo,
And it's gone.
we've been trying to fix it.
Did you hear it? Want to hear it again? No, it's very cool, right? So you can actually
The Hyperlight core gave out a few days ago.
take that hum off immediately. So, and that's just one of our plugins, and this is just one of our fixer-upper plugins. We actually have a lot of other really cool, easy-to-use plugins. And by the way, because DaVinci Resolve works on all platforms, guess what? If you have your DaVinci Resolve 15, your project will go from Mac to Windows to Linux and back. You can email them to each other as long as you have the media. And the plugins are already there if the software is installed. And yes, it's in the free version. Yes, all of these plugins. So that's pretty awesome, right? All right. So I'm going to show you a little bit of advanced audio stuff. I know, don't run. The exciting stuff. I'm just going to go to a different scene. This is the scene we had before, and I'll bring up my meters this time. And I'm going to bring up my mixer. And here's my mixer. I don't have a lot of tracks, but this is that shot inside of the space pod. Can you all see it? It's kind of small right now. This is in the space pod. And in this case, I needed to add some reverb, but there are two voices in this scene. We have the main character, Emiliana, but we also have her computer that's doing some talking. And so what I need to do is make sure they have the same reverb, right? And so to do that, instead of adding reverb, and our reverb, by the way, is right here. I'll be showing it to you in a moment. If I want to add reverb, instead of adding it to every clip, or I can also add effects to a track, in this case, I'm going to add them to an auxiliary bus, because that totally makes sense to me. So right here, I have an auxiliary bus. All I have applied to it right now is some reverb. But what's cool about auxiliary bus is once you set it up is I can put any effect on it I want, or I can have multiple effects, and then you have these send bars that appear in your mixer, and I can just double click and I can adjust how much of that track is going to the bus, basically. So only these two at this moment, but this is used all the time in music, by the way. So for music, you send all your background vocals over to a reverb bus or something like that. It just saves processing. This same reverb can be used for a lot of different tracks. And in this case, I have it set up, and it also has a fader, and that fader doesn't control the volume of the track. It affects how much of that particular effect is going to be applied to whatever's being sent to it. So it's very cool. Just something to throw in there for those of you who didn't know. Now you do. So here's our reverb. Let's look at it. Our reverb's kind of exciting. Now, if I go to my default, it's kind of set to a mid-size room. I can adjust this. And by the way, this is version 3 of our beta, so if you look, it's got all kinds of presets now. If you just downloaded beta 1, you don't have your presets yet, but we've been slowly adding those to our plugins. So, wow, this says bathroom. Let's see what that is. A bathroom in space? Now let's go with the cathedral, something really big. And so now when I play that particular section, those should sound like they're in a cathedral.
Where am I?
You are in orbit of planet Q-46.
Wow. That's pretty cool, right? So I think I'm going to go back to the bathroom, sorry, and see how it's a teeny tiny little space, and I'm actually going to make it smaller. So you also can adjust all of these effects as much as you need to. There, now it's much smaller, And now when I play it,
8, where am I?
there's just a little bit, okay? And when you're working in sound, the difference between a really clean room and a little bit of reverb is huge on a big screen. So cool, yes? Woo! All right, while I'm sitting here, let me show you something else. Notice that I have my mono tracks for my dialogue, and I showed you this once before really quickly. See how I have my panning controls, and I mentioned that, you know, of course I can pan this anywhere I want to, so I can place this, you know, left or right or in the back or the front, but watch this. Hey y'all, watch this. Option, double click, and what do I have now? What? Is that object-based panning? No. So obviously I wouldn't do that with the voice, but this is something that's kind of new, right? This is something there's more and more demand for being able to do object-based panning for multi-speaker submersive or immersive, I should say, environments. And so now we can do that. You can also set it so that you can change any channel to boom only. So for those of you who are creating your LFE effects, your low frequency effects, you can do that right here as well. So pretty cool. Yes? Woo! So, and that's awesome for setting up those sound effects that, you know, you're in a room and you need to make sure the clock is exactly where the clock is ticking so people get that full environment. So there it is in our nice handy mixer. We also have our, of course, all of our automation for automating your tracks, your clips, your plugins, you name it, you can automate it. And let's say you have a very processor-heavy track or you have all kinds of stuff going on, you can now bounce as well. So you can come over here and you can bounce your mix, so you can solo all of your dialogue tracks and bounce and mix out if you want to a new track. And if you do that, you can choose, I would solo my dialogue tracks and I could come over here and say bounce to a new track, and now it'll create. And for those of you who are not in audio pros, bouncing is the same as rendering out a file. That's all it's doing, is it's just flattening it out, rendering it, and now dropping it into a new track, which I can use to create stems within my timeline instead of necessarily going to the deliver page. So that's very helpful as well. So those of you who are wrestling with processor-intensive effects, now you can bounce them. Yay. Oh, come on. That's good. That's really good. Okay, I'm going to fast forward to the end now because I have to. I can go on forever, trust me, but I won't. Let's go to show you the stems, talking about stems. Here we are. So I'm at the end. For those of you who do finishing, or let's say you've got your stems, or someone did their editing in another app and they brought it in. However it happened, you now have your finished video with all of your stems. Let me just show you a couple things with those really quickly. Notice I've shown you this before up at the top, the meters. That's going to show you the audio from every track that's playing. In this case, I've just soloed my stereo mix, so I'm only going to see or hear that particular track. Now I also have not only my stereo mix, but I also have, here are my stereo stems if I need to check those. And by the way, here's my loudness meters over here, so I can adjust those loudness meters as well, or watch them and make sure everything is right. And here's my, again, I just noticed that I can click and swipe, by the way. Isn't that nice? That's a very audio app kind of thing to do, and it works. So I can solo, and that would be my voice, my sound effects, and my music stems, so I can check those each individually or together to see how that's working. And then finally, the thing that most people have headaches about and pull their hair out on is this. I have these lovely 6 tracks. What are those? Anyone? Yay, yes, it is surround. And right now, they're called Audio 5, Audio 6, and notice that they each have like a 1.0 next to them, which means it's one single channel of audio. And if I look over here, at my mixer, I can see that they're all panned right now to the center. That's going to sound great, right? So, and by the way, because this is Fairlight, I can also have multiple outputs. So if I were connected right now to a surround speaker setup, I can have separate buses, which I happen to have. That's my near or my different speaker configurations, but I can also, over here, I have my main. I also have a 5.1 main that I have set up. So if I were set up, can I say set up one more time? No, if I had this configured for 5.1, I could actually go to that main, or I can go back to my stereo main. You can have multiple submixes, and you can monitor any of those right here by just changing. Now, I have these 6 mono tracks all panned to the center. Well, if I want to adjust them, obviously I could just pan them individually to the proper channels, or if I want to put these all together and have single fader control and all the channels panned dead on, all I have to do is go up to the Fairlight menu, and choose Link Group. And by doing that, what it's going to do is it's going to show me every mono track in my entire timeline. So if I have 150 tracks, or if I have 2 tracks, it's going to show me any mono channels. So there was a question earlier when we were doing the Stump the Guru about what if you have a mono left and a mono right. This is how I would link them. I'd take the 2 of those together and choose link, and it would automatically make those a stereo. It would pan them stereo left and right and give you single fader control as if it was a stereo track. In this case, I'm going to link all those just by touching the first and the last. Notice at the bottom it shows 5.1, and the question was, do they still show the film for the Academy standards? It is. It's there too. So 5.1. So once I select it, it shows that it's grouped here, and it also shows that it's grouped up in the mixer. See how it's, up in my meters. You see that funky little band on that shows they're grouped? Now they look the same, but if you look more carefully, they're still called audio 5, 6, and 7, but you notice now it says left, right, center, LFE, left surround, right surround. So it automatically knows what they are because I linked them. Cool? Yes? Woo! And you notice I no longer have individual faders for each one. I now have a single fader, and it is automatically panned. Everything's dead on. I'm ready to output this bad boy. But instead, what if you are now told, well, you know what, we want them back to mono again. Okay, fine. People never change their mind in this industry. So I'm going to go back to link group. I'm going to select and click unlink. And as soon as I do that, you will see that they are now saying 1.0 again for mono tracks. But if I go to my mixer, the panning stayed. So if I link them and unlink them, notice that they're still panned to their surround configuration I had set up. So pretty nice. And all of this, everything I've shown you from just doing your basic editing and syncing your sound effects and adding a clip here and there to your sound library, your ADR tools, normalization, whatever it is you're trying to do, all of that comes with DaVinci Resolve 15. So if you've never tried 15, it's absolutely worth, even if you just put it on your laptop, right? Monkey around with it on the side just to get used to it. It's very, very cool. So thank you guys. You've been really, really patient.